Greetings to our global learners from the Thunderbird School of Global Management as part of the Arizona State University Enterprise. We're so excited to have you with us today as we discuss leadership essentials. So 5 key leadership practices for a more engaged and fulfilling life. I hope that you can join us in the discussion, and we look forward to having questions at the end as well. So let's get started. So for a lot of people, you think about your day, you think about your life, you have a lot on your plate. We know that our global leaders have so much going on in their lives every day. And so I pose this question to you, our global community. What do leaders look like in 2019? And I'm sure you have a lot of really great feedback on what they could look like, but let's dive into that a little further, because this will help us answer the question of how we balance our lives moving into what we do every day. So leaders in 2019, they manage global people and teams across public and private sectors. So a lot of people we have do different things. We have entrepreneurs, we have people working as mid-level managers, all over different sectors, all over the world. They work with multiple teams with different forms of technology and learn new software frequently. We have several learners that learn across different platforms, and we know this because they reach out frequently. They oversee budgets and revenue streams and are responsible for return on investments. So a lot of what you do comes down to how much money you can make for your business or yourself, and that's important to consider. They manage their personal and professional lives. I know a lot of you have multiple things that you juggle on a daily basis. We have our juggler, so to speak, in the corner here. There are several things, several hats that you wear, and we're aware of that. They're frequently on the go. We know for a lot of our learners, you're never in one place for very long, so it's important to find out different ways that we can support your leadership efforts. And the last thing, they're starved for time. They usually have very few minutes in their day to focus on themselves, their personal or their professional development, and so they need quick wins and easy things that they can do in terms of behavior that are going to make a huge difference in their leadership. So let's dive into the 5 key leadership practices. And the first one is know thyself. So for those of you who are familiar with the ancient philosopher, Socrates, know thyself. This is important because as a leader, if you know yourself and your leadership style and how that relates to your day, how you plan, how you communicate with the world, it's an easier way to adjust for your schedule, planning, the people you work with, than if you don't. So let's dive into what that looks like. So we've divided this into leadership qualities and leadership behaviors. So some of the qualities that someone who really knows themselves exhibit would be strategic. So they know I need to plan effectively during my day. I need to plan effectively during my week so that I can accomplish all of the things I want to. So one thing that you might consider, schedule out your meetings. Or for those of you that are trying to accomplish something more personal, let's say you're training for a marathon or planning someone's birthday. The good news is, at least if it's a birthday, you know it's the same day every year. And so you can plan out for that. They are people-centric. They like to work with other people, be involved on teams. And so for them, it's very easy to have more people help them in scheduling out these things. They understand their limitations. So as a leader, if you know yourself, if you know that you're more focused and energetic in the morning, it might make more sense for you to schedule your meetings, time with your people in the morning than it is in the evening or the afternoon. Same can be said for, again, going back to if you're training for a marathon. If you know that you run more effectively in the afternoon, or you know that it's going to be warmer outside, it might be better to prioritize that and do that in the morning. And then lastly, knowing yourself, being able to say no or not now. So you know your priorities. You can prioritize things that are important to you. So if you want to spend more time with your family, or if you want to develop your business, or if you want to be promoted in your company, you can list those things in accordance to what you want to accomplish first and how you might prioritize. If someone comes over and says, hey, I want to start a business with you, and that's not your priority, that's okay. Because you can say, right now I have these other things on my plate and I'd really like to prioritize. So you can say no, or you can say not now. So really the first part is knowing yourself, knowing where your limitations are, knowing what you're really good at, and how you can outline practices for your day. The second one is be prepared. So we have this graphic here, which I love. Most of our learners are on different platforms in terms of technology. They're also on different devices. So you have laptops, phones, we have learners using different types of technology. We also have very traditional use of pen and paper. All of these things are really good for helping you stay organized and prepared. It just depends on what works best for you. So again, some of you may be familiar with Thomas Edison, the person who invented the light bulb. And the quote that I would use for this is, "We should remember that good fortune often happens when opportunity meets with preparation." So a lot of times we are working so hard towards something in our life that we wanted to do, or a goal that we have professionally. We're trying to promote up the ladder, and we're trying to figure out the best ways to do that. So some of it has to do with organizing and strategy, and the other part has to do with being prepared. So let's dive into that a little further. Being prepared. Some can say that you are either preparing or repairing based on how you organize yourself on a daily basis or a weekly basis for achieving your goals, prioritizing your life, both personally and professionally. So if you're preparing for things in advance, it's a lot easier to say, I have a plan, I'm prepared for whatever may come, X, Y, Z, versus I'm repairing, I didn't plan effectively, I wasn't prepared, and I missed X, Y, Z. So that shows up in how organized that you may or may not be. Again, traditional ways, if you want to use pen and paper, if you want to write down goals, that's great. There's also a lot of really great marketing tools and apps that you can use that will help you organize your day. Some of them connect very well across different platforms, Mac users, PC users, and so on and so forth. So I actually encourage you to investigate those as well. They deal well with ambiguity. So what does this mean? For those of you who want to be prepared and you want to schedule and organize your day, what if those things that you had no idea come across your plate, or they come out of left field? How do you deal with that? So you're dealing with ambiguity, you're dealing with the unknown. And the best way to do that is to be prepared, but then also create some structure and routine or cadence for your priorities. So if you know every day you have a staff of 10 people and you meet with them every single day from 9 to 10, and all of a sudden your manager says, I need to meet with you at 10:30, great. You already know what to expect for the day, and you know what your structure and your routine looks like for your priorities. Or if you have to schedule an overlap, you already know what's coming next, so you can deal better with that ambiguity. Leadership quality, that is very important. Leaders take ownership. They're prepared to take ownership of the things that they manage and organize. So if it's your plan or the way that you work with others or what you're responsible for, you take ownership of what you're responsible for. And one of the best ways to do that is not make excuses. So if you're working towards a goal and you need a report done or turned in, or again, if you're training for a marathon, you're trying to lose weight, maybe you're learning a new skill set and your goal is to have it done in 2 weeks, or your goal to hit that milestone is in 5 days. If you get to that milestone and you didn't make it, the best thing you can do is not make an excuse, but find out why you didn't make it so that you can better change and implement and prepare for the next goal that's coming. So it's really about learning and finding ways that work for you. And the best way to do that is to take ownership and not make excuses. So be prepared as much as you possibly can. Life will throw you other things, but as much as you can prepare so that you can deal with the unexpected. Okay, we're moving on to the third leadership practice. Be consistent. For those of you who read leadership books, there's lots of great ones. John Maxwell puts a few out. One of the things he always says, I believe it's John Maxwell, he says, consistency compounds. And again, we're going back to our philosopher here, Aristotle would say, we are not what we repeatedly do, Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So if you're able to be consistent, eventually those little habits that you put in place compound into something bigger, and it helps you get to where you're trying to go. So leadership qualities of someone who's consistent, and consistent you can range from specific items in your day-to-day work, or something again that you're working towards. They're persistent. So I want to train for this marathon. I want to lose 50 pounds. I want to open up my own business. Being persistent and making sure that you don't give up, and finding ways for you to get nuggets of what you're working towards and work toward them every day is really important. So you practice your craft. You practice the things that you want to do moving forward so that you can continually be consistent, and that when you're able to achieve your milestone, you already know what to do. You're already there because you've been practicing the entire time. They're tough. Consistent leaders are tough. They're tough because they prioritize. They're tough because they say no. And they're tough because they say yes to themselves and the goals that they're working towards. So being consistent means setting up a routine for yourself that makes sense. So again, going back to the example, you're working towards a project or a deliverable, and you want to make sure that you meet it. Sometimes that means you're going to have to sacrifice other things, which can be really hard. But having that daily routine in place helps to prioritize what's important to you, and helps you be tough. Helps you make time for the things that you need to practice and work towards. Tough leaders are not afraid to try new things and learn from their mistakes. Think about when the last time was for each of you when you were asked to try something new, or asked to adopt a new philosophy or a new process, or try something new at work. Or a friend reached out and said, I'd like to try a new hobby with you. I'd like to try baseball. Did you try it? Were you open? Did you respond? Did you have an open mindset to do that? Or were you shut off and said, I'm not going to try. I'm not going to look towards this as an opportunity for me to grow and learn to be tough. It's really important to try new things if you can. And again, I go back to technology. There's so many apps out there and available, and things on the internet that would help you to learn new skills, where you don't even have to physically be in a space to do that. You can learn online, and it's a really great way for you to do that. Leadership quality number 3 for this is being agile. So flexible. You can be consistent while being flexible. You're able to respond to changes in the market, to changes in your circumstances, to changes in other people. And if you're flexible enough to do that, it really opens up many other areas of opportunity. And some examples of how you may do that would mean that you can easily change direction. So again, as you know, because things change so rapidly, especially in a global economy, you may be working towards a goal one day, and then the next quarter or the next 6 months, someone says, we need to change direction. Are you prepared to do that? Are you agile? Are you flexible? And if so, how does that show up? You can say, yes, I'm ready for the change. Yes, I'm ready to change directions. And then how can I do that? And our 4th key leadership practice, build your community. So a lot of what we've discussed for the first 3 leadership practices are specific to the individual, knowing yourself, being consistent, being prepared. Those are all things that you can do as a leader, as an individual. So it doesn't necessarily require someone else to help you do those things. But it's really hard to get where you're going alone, and it's even harder to accomplish larger goals by yourself. Beyond that, at the Thunderbird School of Global Management, we really strongly believe in giving back to our communities in whatever way, shape, and form that looks like, so that we further support economic growth and development all over the world. So one of the best ways to do that is to build your community. So don't be an island to yourself. Build your community. Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So for a lot of you, depending on where you are, And Becca, I'm hoping people will let us know where they're located when we have questions coming up. Building community is a huge part of who you are. It's a huge part of who we are. And we want to make sure we can do that successfully. So leaders who believe in building community are authentic. They're authentically themselves. If I am a natural born dancer or singer or artist, I'm not going to try and be an engineer. The other way around, if I'm a doctor, I'm going to be a great leader as a doctor. I'm not going to try and be a great leader as a singer, although you could, because anything's open. So real leaders and great leaders who build community are authentic. They create time for people. They organize ways within their own community to connect. One of the things that we've been doing here, and hopefully you know, is that these webinars are a way for us to connect with you, and we want to know how they help and support you, and we want to be part of your lives to help you improve yourselves as well. So create time for people, whether it's face-to-face or over the phone or with Zoom, any of those technology products that you feel comfortable with to help create community. They have a growth mindset. So they believe in the value of different perspectives and different cultures and different mindsets. And this is really important to building community because there are different thought leaders that have different perspectives, and they sometimes will be challenging or frustrating, and how you respond is through a growth mindset to include them in that dialogue and help them become a part of your community and your team. So one of the best ways to do that, if you haven't already, is to find a mentor or be a mentor, really, in your community. And really, for those of you that haven't mentored before or haven't found a mentor, this is really important because it connects you to other people. It gives you the opportunity to learn something from someone that may or may not be in your industry or sector, open up the door for potential opportunity and networking. And then for those of you who are further along in your career or in your community, giving back to someone to help guide them is also really important. So a lot of times, one of my colleagues says, mentoring is all about being able to support someone in their journey and then have someone who's the mentee look up to that mentor and say, am I doing okay? Am I on the right track? Is this where I should be going? And that really helps you build your network in your community. And then the third part of building community would have to do with being humble. So again, we mentioned earlier how you're humble and how you show up means giving back if you can. And we realize not everyone's always in a place to give back, but if you do, think about the impact that may have and the ability that you have to learn from others and then have others learn from you too. Okay, and last but certainly not least, you've worked so hard as an individual, you've connected with your community. The last thing you should do always is celebrate your success. This is so important. Susan Phillips says, celebrate the success of others. High tides floats all ships, which is true. If you're in a community, no matter where you are in the world, if you do well, odds are someone around you is also going to do well. And if something happens to that leader and it's negative, it usually negatively impacts the community as well. So how we help each other is how we work together, and ultimately celebrating the success of others is equally as important. So if you're looking to celebrate success, if you're meeting a milestone, or if you're working with a group of people, or you, like I said, you're training for a marathon, there's so many different ways for you to celebrate success. One of those is to first and foremost set your goals. You want to know what you're working towards. If you don't have a plan, you might not be planning for success. So set those goals and share your milestones. If you're able to share it with your best friend or a coworker or a colleague, you're that much more able to achieve those milestones. Someone can check in with you. They can say, I heard you were working on this degree program. How's that going? Or I heard you were trying to lose 10 pounds. How is that going? And it helps create a great support system and network for you and others as well. Have high expectations. As a leadership quality, if you're trying to celebrate success and hit those big goals, set expectations. So you have high expectations for yourself, you hit a goal, great. Now what are you going to work towards next? How does that show up in what you do? Or if someone comes to you and says, I saw that you completed this goal, I saw that you met this expectation, we'd love for you to do X, Y, Z next. And it's a really great way for you to showcase and celebrate your expectations, or excuse me, your success, through saying, here are the expectations I had, this is how I met them, and this is how I'm going to move forward. So you would want to inspect what someone else expects from you. And again, this goes back to celebrating your successes. Are you sharing the wins that you have at work, at home, in your communities? How are other people supposed to know what things you're doing and goals you're achieving if you don't share that with them? And part of that is celebrating the successes that you have. And then leaders who celebrate their success achieve. So you set a goal, you have high expectations, and then you work towards achieving that goal. Once you do that, that's amazing. And it's a domino effect. It impacts everyone that you work with, the communities that you live in, and it shows up in different ways. So celebrating with your community that you've built, whether personally or professionally, is a really great way to keep going, to recharge your batteries, to make sure you feel connected to a larger goal and mission. And we would hope that you do that. Certainly here at Thunderbird, we hear from students all day and every day about the successes they're having. Certainly, we would love to hear from you as well, wherever you are in the world, and what you're achieving, what you're working towards, so that we can help support you in that. We certainly want you to know we support you in that each and every day. So again, the 5 leadership practices, hopefully these are helpful to you. Know thyself, be prepared, be consistent, build your community, and then celebrate your success as you have those wins. And I think now we have time for questions.
Okay, Dr. Polk, we have our first question from David.
Hi, David.
Being humble and celebrating success seems to be in contradiction. How do you manage that?
That is a great question. David, I hope that you respond and let Becca know where, at least geolocation, you are calling in from or posting your question. But you are correct. That is in contradiction. It is a hard thing to both manage and balance, especially if you're in the professional world and you're working at a certain place. Depending on that culture or corporate structure, it may be viewed very differently to celebrate successes versus being humble, or both. I personally believe you can be both, as well as one or the other, depending on who you are as a leader and being an authentic leader. I think the big thing for us as we think about leadership and what that means is being humble is an approach to, I can learn new things, I can learn from other people, I am not an island unto myself, and making sure people know that about you, if that's who you are as a leader, is really very important. I would actually say it's almost more important to socialize that first and foremost than it is to celebrate your success. By doing that and by being someone who says, I have more to learn and I can grow from others and their perspective, it's a lot easier to create a community and a team and then work towards things successfully together. And then, in my opinion, it's almost better if you're working towards something as a team, because by the end of achieving that goal, you celebrate that success with that team. So I hope that answers your question, but certainly there's value in each of those.
Yes, thank you. And David is calling from Atlanta.
All right, thank you. Thank you, David from Atlanta.
Okay, next question from Kiran. How do you balance personal and professional life?
That is an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. If I'm being perfectly transparent, I'm not sure balance is the best word for us to be using in 2019 in terms of how we balance our personal and professional lives. I think because of the way global economy has sped up our lives and technology has become such an integral part of our human behaviors, I think it's maybe even less about balance and more about being present in the time that you have. So if you are, at work during the day or night or wherever, being really present, mindfully present and cognizant of that work while you're there is really, really important. But then on the flip side of that, being with your family or your friends or your community, if it is outside of work, in your personal life, being available and being present during those times that you set to, I think is equally as important. And so one of the ways I find to be really helpful with that is scheduling things as far in advance as I possibly can. So if you know that someone's, for example, if you have a significant other or a family member and their birthday is coming up, how many things on your professional side can you align or set up in advance if you can, so that you can take that time off, or you can take that time for your family or for your personal needs, and then scheduling it. It's a part of your whole life, not a part of your half life or a fraction of your life. It's your whole life, balancing your personal and professional priorities. And so if you can, planning ahead is helpful, and then just really being mindful depending on where you are. So that gets more challenging every day, but I would actually love to hear if you have tips as well. And I'll open this to our people, our folks on the webinar. If you know of better tips, we would love to hear them.
And from Jane, great information for leadership practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
She also has a question. How do you lead across countries and cultures? Do you recommend any good literature on this?
Yes. Thank you very much for that question. We have a few different professors here actually at the Thunderbird School of Global Management, and they both talk a lot, very much in depth, about how you lead across cultures and global mindsets and perspectives. And so Dr. Mansoor Javedan has written several different publications that specifically address a global mindset and how you would work with people across different industries and different areas, across different cultures. So I would highly recommend, if you haven't, either going to our thunderbird.asu.edu website, and he's on there. I believe we should have some literature tied to him as well. And then Dr. Chris Pearson also talks about global leadership and building communities through leadership. Both of them have done extensive research in the areas. They are seasoned in their field, and they really provide tangible nuggets of information for you to easily consume and then put into practice for how you would manage across the global spectrum. So again, if you haven't, please go to thunderbird.asu.edu, and both of those faculty are there, and then search from there. Might be helpful.
Cal from Georgia has a question.
Okay.
How do you apply these principles where organization is global and priorities are different and no internal alignment or accountabilities exist?
Oh my goodness. Cal, this is Cal, right?
Yes.
Cal, this is a great question. This is a question out from my own heart and brain here. Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the priorities that you have set within your organization may or may not be the same as another organization overseas or in another area of the world. And so based on these things, it can be very challenging to find ways in which you can behave or put into practice these leadership qualities. So the first thing I would say is, if it's possible, and it might not be, but if it is, to find out from that organization if there's anything remotely similar in terms of values or perspective or communication that aligns with you or your organization. I mean, communication is a very broad one, but are there things that that organization has embraced or that culture has embraced that your organization does as well, or you do as well? Do they embrace different types of technology or leverage different systems or software that your organization does as well? Whatever you can do to find a common thread and really be that humble leader and find out from them what they might want in terms of support speaks volumes across wherever you're coming from in your industry. I would hope that your organization supports you in doing this, but even if you can find one thing to help build and create that community, it goes such a long way. And really, it creates an olive branch that builds a longevity in terms of relationships for long-term success in business ventures.
How can you encourage those you lead to engage in these practices with you without feeling like the practices are imposed by a leader?
Well, I'm not, is that from Cal as well?
This is a new anonymous question.
Oh, anonymous question. So some of this is going to have to be from the leader. So we're shifting again. I know the first part of this was, what can you do as a leader? As a person, as an individual, how can you take ownership? And then the second half is more about community and success. And I think those are equally as important. But if you're in an organization or a culture that may or may not be supportive of these things, really at the end of the day, the only thing that you have control over is yourself. And so taking ownership of that as a leader and knowing your sphere of influence with other people is really important. So, your organization, maybe, we see this a lot actually with organizations going through large changes or shift in culture or shift in product. And you have, you're at risk of leaving a group behind or not bringing them with you on your journey. And so one of the biggest things you can do, if you're willing to, is socialize the things that you stand for, or how you support the mission and values of that organization, where it aligns with you as a leader, and then how you practice those things is going to be completely up to you and what you're comfortable with. And certainly, knowing that you put those things into practice, also being open and responsive to, the feedback, or putting them into play in a smaller group of people and then gaining their feedback as well. And just saying, here are some things I'd like to try. If you're a manager, especially if you're a mid-level or higher manager, here are some things I'd like to try to improve the morale of our team. I'd like us to do a meet and greet, or I'd like us to do a trivia day once a month. See how they feel about that. It's a lot easier to go on a journey with people who are there with you versus I'm going to impose we do trivia day one day a month or something similar to that. So it's a challenge for sure, because if you don't have that support or you're not sure how to get started, it can be very challenging and even confusing at times. But I'd say set a plan, put it in place, start to act and implement on your plan, be consistent, be prepared, and move forward. Just try something new, take a risk. I recommend taking a small risk first and not a big risk, but try. You might be really surprised at what you find.
A question from Jimmy in Lisbon. What techniques can you suggest to cultivate the proposed mindset? How can you remember to stay in this mindset on a moment-to-moment basis? Do you have any daily practices?
I believe, I hope you're asking about being mindful and being present when you're in different areas. Is that the question?
Well, and how do you get that mindset?
And how do you get that mindset?
How do you create it for yourself?
So I have had across several different years worked in different industries, primarily within education, which I'm most passionate about. I've had mentors that sit outside of education and within education. And so one of the practices I have is I have a mentor as a level up for me, so someone that sits higher up in an organization than myself, who I meet with once a month, and sometimes with scheduling, maybe once every 2 months. And I ask that person, how do I grow? How do I become a better leader, and how do I serve more people? And then keeping that in mind really helps me set a better mindset for what I do every day and work hard towards those goals. Keeping that mindset for me is a lot about scheduling and making sure I prioritize so I know what I'm working towards, and it's very specific and tactical. But I also do that in my personal life as well, and I know it's really hard to do that because when you're at the end of the week or you're at the end of the month and you're working so hard at work, you are trying to find time for yourself and your family and your group, your community. So I think it starts with, how do you take care of yourself? As leaders, we often negate that. We don't necessarily set aside time for ourselves. I am an early riser, so I get up first thing in the morning and I have my morning routine and I follow that, and I'm able to support my family and my community in doing that. And then the next thing is working. So I'm able to work and go through that, and knowing that I have these practices in place to help me every day and support me every day, I think is really important. For some people, this looks very different. So meditation or spending time with your family on the personal side may look drastically different. Again, I think it just depends on what is important and then how you prioritize that. But the challenge, of course, is if you're doing something at work, you're thinking about your family sometimes. And then sometimes it's the opposite. So you're with your family and you're thinking about work, or you're with your community and you're thinking about work. And so some other things I think that are helpful is I turn off my notifications during certain times with family on my phone so that I'm mindfully present there and I'm not necessarily getting pinged during a certain time. And then, a couple hours or something spending it with them, and then I turn it back on. So there are lots of different ways. If any of that is helpful, I hope it is.
Okay, a question from Regina in Michigan. When it comes to being prepared, what kinds of tips can you give us around influencing difficult people?
So what kind of tips for influencing difficult people to be prepared?
Yes.
Okay. So one thing that you may notice as a leader, depending on where you are in the world, is that everyone has their own definition of preparedness. And it's not good or bad, it's just different. And the first thing I would say is trying to level set and find clarity around what it means to be prepared. So if I work in the fashion industry, or I work in let's just say the wedding industry, and I'm an event planner, for me, prepared looks very different than someone who is a teacher or someone that works in the medical field. And so a lot of times we want people to come with us and do these things and put these things into practice, but there's not really a clear understanding on what the preparedness or level of preparedness could look like. And so the first thing I would say is, if you have the time and you're able to do it, is to sit with that person or that group and just ask the question, what does it look like to be prepared? Or how do you prepare for your day? How do you prepare for your week? And then if they are able to give you some feedback, it might help you better understand where they are so that you can help them move forward. So I'll give you an example of this. Prepared for you as a leader may look like this. You get up every day, you schedule your time, you have your weekly meetings, and these things are set in place. You're prepared. You go in, someone else comes in at a different time, which is completely normal, by the way, because everyone works everywhere in the world now. But they take their lunch or their break earlier or later than you do. And so you may think, are they prepared? Are they working on things they should be? And the truth is that they could have a completely different structure to their day, and they're doing what you need them to do, or they're prepared, but you just don't know how or what it looks like. And so for me, it's more about seeking first to understand, and then having them come with you, because it's a lot easier to give direction if you know where someone is. And meeting them where they're at too, I think, is really important. Good question. That was a good question.
A question from May. How can someone lead a team when they don't really believe in their skills?
That is a very good question. So depending on your area of thought, or who you read or follow in terms of thought leadership, there's two different ways to look at this. The first one, which I'm not really a huge fan of, is fake it till you make it. So if you're in a new role, obviously you're going to be learning new things. Go in there knowing that you've gotten to that place for a very good reason and that you will learn as you go. There's nothing wrong with that approach. That's one approach. The other approach is maybe you've accepted a new role and there's different responsibilities or things that you need to do, and either you don't have the experience or you're not really sure how to do that right away. I actually think that's perfectly okay as well, as long as you start to practice what those things are and you start practicing them right away. So in other words, don't wait until a big project comes up or it's due. If you know there's something big coming and you want to work towards that, but you're not sure how, reach out. Find someone in your department that you can have as a mentor, that can mentor you. Find someone that has either done the job before and they can answer questions. And then just start asking people, how would you do this? What technology might you use to leverage this for what I'm working towards? If you're okay sharing your project or what you're working on, say, I'm working towards this, right? It goes back to community. It goes back to sharing your milestones and your goals. I'm working towards this. How do you think I might best get there? Is something you could ask them. And really bringing in their mindset and their opinion, I think, is important because it helps you build what you're trying to achieve as a very thoughtful leader. And it also shows that you're open to other perspectives. But practice. Get in there and try new things as quickly as you can. That way, once you get to the goal that you're trying to meet, you can get that much closer to achieving it.
Cal from Georgia would like to ask for that name by Dr. Maxwell of the book that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, John Maxwell. John Maxwell has written several books. So if you look him up on the internet, you will find several books.
And final question, from Anonymous, in your opinion, which of these practices is the most challenging to maintain?
Ooh. Well, thank you, Anonymous. I think all of them are challenging to maintain. I think maybe even a better way of looking at it is that the one that's probably least practiced that I see, or over the years, is that the community piece and the celebrating success piece are not sustainable because this could depend on the culture too, right? So again, we have to be supportive of different cultures and different ways that people practice this, but I think it's important to celebrate your milestones and what you're working towards with other people. And I think that's hard to sustain, and that's probably most challenging because everyone's in a different space. They're in a different geolocation, but they're also in different industries. And so it's hard to connect and make a meaningful connection if you're not face-to-face, but there are different ways to do that. So like I mentioned, if you haven't sought a mentor or decided to mentor someone else, that's probably one of the simplest ways to do it, because then you're either cheering someone on or someone else is cheering you on. And that's a way for you to celebrate your success and build your community. There's a misconception it has to be this huge, grandiose thing, when in reality it just has to be something practical and meaningful to you. And you don't necessarily need a structure for that. You just need the will to put it together and maintain it. So I would say those are the most challenging.
And we do have one final question.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, this is great. This is great.
Bob in Washington, D.C. What are some strategies for identifying a mentor?
Bob, wonderful question. Strategies for identifying a mentor. So if you haven't yet, or depending on what you're looking to achieve, I would do a SWOT analysis of your strengths and weaknesses. So just to see what areas you're looking to grow. Or if you're looking to move from one industry to another, that's a really great way to look as well. So if you can, I would start first and foremost where you're at. So if there's someone in your organization or sector that you work in, it could be someone that you really look up to or someone that you've met potentially. If you go to a networking event, that's a great way to do it. There are a lot of online networking events as well, so it helps you reach a lot more people across further distances. Because I know too, if you really want a mentor, but maybe they don't live in the same area, you can meet with them just as effectively with a technical tool or a technology tool such as Zoom or FaceTime or whatnot, and that's just as useful. And then just be very honest and be a humble leader. I'm looking to grow. I'd like to learn these skill sets, or I'd really like your perspective on these things. Would you be my mentor? Here's what I'm looking to do. And then outline for them what that means, right? So I'd really like to meet with you once a quarter, or I'd like to correspond over email when I have tough questions or I'm in a tough situation, or I'd love to know from you which conferences you attend so I can better build my skill sets. It's a really great way to reach out. If you are looking for a mentor, I believe I know we have our alumni network as well, and some really great organizations. So you can definitely reach out and we can help to facilitate that relationship. But overall, there's so many ways just to reach out. And I think you'd probably be surprised at how many people say yes and that are willing to work with you. And for the ones that don't, that's okay. You move on and then you find someone else. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Dr. Polk, and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you next month on September 19th.
Thank you, everyone.